Okay, welcome back everybody. We're Unit 6, Week 2, and as you know, we kind of shifted around a little bit, had to change things because of the current situation and availability. But we're going to talk about procedures and then have a bit of a primer on our project so that we make sure everybody's on the same page and is comfortable doing that. So our plan for this week is we're going to recap the procedures week just a little bit. We're going to go over the second part of the discussion assignment, which will be due this week. We'll do a part-by-part project overview and review, and so you understand what you need to deliver to me at the end for your project. We're going to introduce some possible tools. I came up with a bit of a simple spreadsheet that you're welcome to use or not use. And then we'll look at next week and beyond to see what other changes may have to come about simply because of the current COVID situation. First and foremost, I really love the policies that you guys wrote. I thought they were very succinct. They really fell into the template nicely. Everybody seemed to understand what each section was asking for. Sometimes there's a bit of a nuance between the purpose and the policy itself. People tend to kind of wash the two together. But you guys did a really great job on that. There were a few that had punishments in rather than actions, especially some absolutes. Obviously, when you violate a policy, there's some action that comes from violating a policy. If it's a law, that type of policy, it's going to be imprisonment perhaps. If it's one in a workplace, it could put your workplace or your work in jeopardy, right? You could be terminated. However, we don't ever want to say anything with an absolute, okay? First off, actions, the way we described them last week, really are what will happen, what are the types of things that will happen, the progressive type things that will happen if you violate the policy. And they indicate an adjustment or a correction. We're trying, with each successive step, to change somebody's behavior. Punishments, when we say you will be fired, you will be expelled, you will be this, you will be that, really indicate a pain point. And it really isn't the security manager's job to do that. Think of it like police and courts. The police may arrest you, but the police can't put you really in jail. They can put you in a holding cell overnight or whatever, right? But a court then puts you in jail or doles out the punishment. And as a security manager, you are a little closer to the police than you are to a court. So you really have to try to stay away from saying this will happen to you and make it be a punishment. And then you also have to think about which gives you better traction, right? Do you get more bees with honey or with vinegar? And if you can make it so that you're trying to show that the policy makes sense, it fits your values, it does good, which most policies can do good, as you showed with the ones you wrote, which one's going to get better traction, the positive or the negative? And I think it's certainly the positive. So the template offers that plug-and-play way to write a policy. Just put the different sections in, and it all comes together as a fairly well-written, organized policy, right? It's very structured, and all of your policies will look the same. You're certainly, when you get into your career, able to, I'm sure, and you should think about writing your own template, adding other things that might be required by your company or by your industry. Could be a section on laws that are applicable or federal regulations that are applicable if you're in, say, nuclear or drug manufacturing or excuse me, gas and oil. There are certain things that are required as far as administrative law. You may want to add that section or others. So you can devise your own template. This week, though, we're going to take the template that I provided and that you wrote from, and we're going to try to write a different kind of policy. You all signed up for this class so that you can learn a little bit about security and physical security. So we will look at physical security type policies this week. So we're going to take the same template, exact same template that you use to write your, hold a rocker or go beep, 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 or say hello to everybody policy, whatever one you happen to write. And we're going to write a security policy. It could be a visitor escort policy, an ID wearing policy, the one badge, one entry policy, basically saying that if you run your badge on a card reader, you can't run it for other people. You only run it for you, and one person goes in on one card read. A policy on receipt of personal mail and drop-offs. It's something that you will definitely have to have. People tend to get things dropped off at work. So imagine you have a workplace of 500 people, and everybody wants to have a hot lunch. And so at lunchtime, everybody's significant other or friend or whatever drops off a pickup order or whatever from wherever. And now you have 500 hot lunches sitting in your lobby that the guard has accepted. And then when somebody can't find their lunch because somebody walked by and just grabbed it because it looked good, now the guard is having to explain why they couldn't keep track of somebody's McDonald's order. So you'll need a policy on things like that, right? Personal things dropped off. Another example is that when you have contractors that work in your facility, sometimes the contract house who pays them wants to drop paychecks off at the front desk. And then the supervisor will come and pick up the paychecks and deliver them to the different contractors. Say your cleaning company has 10 people that clean your building. The cleaning company may have hard checks. A manager comes and drops off the checks at the front desk to the guard, and then the housekeeping manager comes and picks up those checks and hands them out to the various janitors and housekeepers. What if one of those checks is missing? Well, maybe it never came in the bundle in the first place, or maybe somebody took it. Do you really want your guard to have the liability and have to explain themselves? So a policy on how people drop things off. Or you can write any other type of security policy you want, so long as you just run the suggestion by me. Just send me a text and let me know what you want to write on. I'm sure we can arrange it, but because some of you may be working in the field now and have the need to write a policy, and you might want to work on something for work, which is a great way to get a 2-for-1 special. So one of those policies or any other security policy that you run by me, use the same template, and what you'll do is you will respond to your original discussion. So just go into your original discussion thread, the one you wrote for the happiness or the carrier rock or whatever, and now answer yourself with a security policy so it stays in the same file. So I know a lot of you are doing pretty well with the projects, and you seem to have a pretty good grasp on what's required of you and what you need to do. Others are having a little bit of trouble, especially with the last part, the budget part, which is not unusual. I can't imagine that any of you have done a planning project for a warehouse in your past. Maybe you have, and that's great, but I can't imagine many of you have done that. So this is your first time doing a project. There's lots of moving parts. So we're going to break it down into the 3 main things that you will need to hand in when your project is due. That's the drawing, the scope document, and the budget. The first 2 you've already done if you did the midterm, and you have a pretty good idea, and I don't think anybody really bombed out on those too badly to the point where they didn't understand it. So I'll go over those real quickly, and then we'll dive into the budget part, which seems to be tripping a lot of people up, and it's not that hard. So let's talk about the different parts of the project. So the drawing for the project. You turned in one for the midterm, and I gave you pretty good latitude to do your own key and to understand that kind of thing. You'll be doing the same as the midterm, but you'll be doing a clean copy, a new copy of that drawing. And the key is provided for you. The readers will be in red, lights will be in yellow, alarm points in blue, access control panels in green, and standalone panels if you use them in pink or purple. It's kind of hard to see the difference in the 2 of them, quite frankly, so use either one. But you will do a clean copy of your drawing, make any changes that were suggested in your midterm feedback, because everybody got feedback on their midterm, and then change the coloring to this standard key. You'll still need to list the colors and what they mean on your drawing, but this is the key to use. And the other colors don't exist, okay? Then on the rooms themselves, for the different types of locks you will use, you can go ahead and just write in ES if there's an electric strike. Just write it next to the door. OLS for office lock set, CSLS for classroom security, the old style. I mean, there's the abbreviations for what we studied. And if it's going in a room, like in an office, just write it right in the office. You don't have to put it right on the door because it may get jammed up with other things, right? I know an alarm is for glass if you're using glass breaks, which in most of the feedback I suggested you not really use. You can if you want. But if you use the blue and put it on the window, I'll know that that's a glass break alarm point, as opposed to one that's on a door that I know will be a door contact of some kind. And if it's motion, I'll know because you'll have it out in the open somewhere. So I'll know what kind they are. But use those colors, and that's what I'm going to look at, because I found, quite frankly, that although I normally use my own key and others do too, when you're looking at 50 of them at one point, it takes an amazing amount of time to adjust to what each color means. So we're going to standardize these colors. You're going to need to do a clean copy of your drawing anyway, because I wasn't going to accept the same one you used for midterm, because some of them needed some adjustment as far as their neatness and their organization. So this is what I want you to use. If anybody has any questions on that, certainly give me a call, let me know. So the scope should be pretty easy. That's the same as the midterm, except you're going to add the cameras in. Some of you jumped ahead and did the cameras already, even though it was pretty specifically outlined in the midterm not to do that part. But now you're going to do all of the red parts that are in the scope document. And most of them you have done, in fact, up to the cameras. But in the cameras, you're going to add the model numbers to the scope. what cameras you're going to use, and why you're using that model, right? I'm using this model, which is a pan tilt zoom, because I want to be able to cover point A to point B. Or I'm using this model because it's panoramic and I want to be able to see the entire area of whatever. I'm using this fixed camera with a single lens because I want to concentrate on this door or that area or whatever. The model number and why you're using it for each camera that you use. Make sure you make any adjustments from the scope document that I listed in feedback on the midterm. I will have the feedback list in front of me. When I pull up your stuff, I will look at the feedback and make sure you made adjustments. Or if you didn't make the adjustments, you explained why you thought you shouldn't make the adjustments. So the feedback that I gave at midterm, you've got to take it seriously, because it will, even if you got a perfect score in the midterm and there was feedback saying, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do that, in the final, I will probably pull it out unless you can better explain why you did things. So make sure your scope document is complete, all the red sections are complete, and you've taken into account any suggested feedback from the midterm and either explained as to why you want to stay with that position or made those changes. Okay, so far we have the drawing and we have the scope, and I think they're pretty self-explanatory. If you've never done a budget for anything, I mean, besides maybe something, your own budget for your own expenses, it can be a really ominous process, and you think that there's got to be some set way of doing it. And there really isn't. Each company does budgeting a little differently. Now, I mean, there's certain budget concepts, and in my security management course, if you take that next year, you'll see that, I use a different process for budgeting and explain that every company has their own little nuances of doing it. Some use a workbook, some use a worksheet, some you just do a Word document, explain what you want to spend. I mean, there's different ways to set a budget, but we're going to use a fill-in-the-blanks method, excuse me, that uses an Excel spreadsheet. And you can add new formulas. If you're good at Excel, you can do your own. I'm going to give you one that you can potentially use. I'm not great at formulas in Excel, and the reason I say that is you are responsible for making sure the math adds up. If I made a mistake in a formula, right? If I say add 10% to something and it looks like it's more than 10%, we all know what 10% looks like, right? Drop a zero. Then you need to go in and fix that. I think my calculations are right, but you need to check them, and you're responsible for those. So let's take a look at the spreadsheet that I used for our budget. Yeah, I know you can't see that either, and I added it in here as a placeholder, so when you print out the slides, you'll be able to see it. But I'm going to put in the actual spreadsheet here, and it'll be an addition onto the documents for the lesson. So we're going to try to do this in a couple of parts here. So this is what the spreadsheet looks like that I attached. This is kind of just a screenshot of part of it here. And what I've listed here is, this is our project warehouse, right? Prepared by, and you put your name in there, right? And then it has the different items that were listed on the budget. So, for instance, an access control head end. We all know the head end, that's the computer you use to program the panels so that they can talk to the readers, right? And everybody requires a head end. If you're going to have any card readers, and everybody in the class use some form of card reader or access control reader, be it biometric, biodigital, whatever, so you need to have a head end. So there's one included, and it costs $10,000. So the subtotal is $10,000. Now you needed some field panels, right? So most of you had like 2 field panels. So if we go here to this cell, and I say 2, and then I jump out of that, notice that they were $1,500 each, and now you have $3,000 as your subtotal for the items. You had 2 panels, and if you have readers, let's just say you have, since you had 2 panels, let's go 4 readers, right? So we say 4, and look at that. There's your $12,000 right there. So everything is adding up to what you need. If you go over here and start changing formulas in these blocks, then nothing is going to add up. So let me show you what happens when you get down below. So you'll do that and you'll add up, say, you don't have any fingerprint readers at all, so you throw a 0 in there. And boom, it comes up to 0. So alarm points, let's say read switches, maybe we had 10 of those. So 10 of those came out to $5,000. So when we go down below, we've added everything in. We see our budget is $55,000. The subtotal of our components, the ones I've added up here, the 10,000, the 12,000, 3,000, 5,000, right? That comes to, so far, $30,000, right? So this will change every time you add components, so you know how close you're getting to your 55. Now, one thing that you have to understand is we've added in 10% costs for maintenance for the first year. So you had to sign a maintenance contract, and it's going to be 10% of what this number is. So it's $3,000. You also need to have a contingency. Contingency is for costs that you didn't think about. Overruns. Somebody calls and says you spec these cameras, but they're no longer made. They're going to discontinue those. They have a new model, and it costs $300-400 more per unit. Those types of things you put a contingency in for. That'll add up for you. So the total cost so far with the things I added above is $36,000, and I'm $19,000 under my budget of $55,000. So really what you have to just understand is when you do your drawing and you're done and you know how much everything costs, you just put in how many of these you had. So I didn't use facial recognition in the one I did. There's a 0. And I didn't use any biodigital because I used standard card and fob readers, right? And I used 4 of those and I put my panels in. So I have 0 there. And I didn't use motion lasers. I didn't use a standalone alarm because I'm going to integrate it. So when you integrate it, you have to have at least 1 alarm board for every 32 inputs. So you should be good there. So I had to add 1 of those, which was $100. Then I needed some Rex devices here and there. Let's say I needed 4 of those. And I used push buttons. I didn't use infrared motion. Now cameras, I have to put my camera model in first. So you're going to have to do the math on this when you put in the cost per unit in here. So let's say the unit you pick out is, let's just say, $450. And you decided to use 4 of those. There's your $1,800. You need a mount for those cameras. I'm going to put all of mine on pendants. Now I'm going to use, I decided to use outside cameras and nothing inside. Let's just say I'm going to use, I had 4 cameras, so I'll need 4 swing-aways. There's $2,800. And I don't have any other components that I'm aware of, and at this point I am $12,000 under budget. It did all the math for you. Okay, so all you need to do is add in what you have. You have to have 1 head end. All the rest is based on what's in your drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and take those things out. And you'll notice when I do that and go out of the cell, it changes column D all back to zeros for you. So that's what we're going to do for our budget. A spreadsheet's not hard to work with. I'm sure many of you have worked with them in other classes, in math classes. But if you haven't, all you need to do is put in the number of units here. And when you get to the camera part, okay, your cameras include the model numbers. And if you have more than 1 model number, then let me know and I'll add in more camera sections. But if not, you can do the carry forward math yourself. And over here in F, it says, in column F, here, put your camera model numbers, right? Right there, right? In that section there under cameras, column F. There's another column F and other components. If there's other things you need to add, list what it is over here in column F and tell me, and then put in the number and the cost and carry it forward. Everything else should be done for you. Try to make this easy. If it makes things harder, again, give me a call and I'll talk you through it. So here's a couple hints on the budget, not the filling out of the form, but just the budget itself. Because I think you noticed on the bottom there, I didn't add in too many things on my list, and I was getting close to that 55 pretty quick. I mean, the 10% contingency and the 10% maintenance already chop you, right? So you really need to think frugally when you're putting this together, and it's part of the exercise. Don't get caught up in too many camera features, right? Cameras can get really expensive. One student suggested a heat-seeking camera on the outside of the building, which is a great idea. In fact, look, I'm looking at the same model almost of heat-seeking camera that student recommended to put in lobbies now, because they are able to take body temperature within 0.03 degrees of someone and 16 people at a time. So we're considering putting them in certain lobbies so we can tell if someone has a fever when they come back into our buildings, and detect whether or not we should pull them aside and actually have them go through a medical screening. So, I mean, the issue was, though, that camera can be very, very expensive, and it will eat up the budget very, very quickly. So to that particular student, it wasn't a bad idea. It was just simply a very expensive idea that's going to kill you, right, when it comes to that budget. So don't get caught up in the features too much. Use an all-purpose camera. I mentioned the P3245 because it's something I use a lot of. It's the Axis model. We're using Axis, again, not a commercial. You can use any other brand, but use a all-purpose camera, something simple. That's a single lens dome camera, indoor use. I think it works just fine for most everything we need to do. However, you might want to look at multi-lens domes. There are some of those dome cameras that have a camera that goes 2 different ways inside of it. Cheaper than putting up 2 cameras because you only pay for 1 dome, 1 heater, 1 set of amenities, power supplies, everything else. But it has 2 lenses or even 4 lenses, so it can look 4 ways. So you could drop 1 pendant maybe in the middle of the warehouse and look 4 directions. You could use a panoramic view and put it in a corner. We talked about panoramic views, and they're all there in that catalog. But again, don't get hung up on too many high-end features that you won't use because it's going to eat your budget. And when it eats your budget, it eats up your contingency and it eats up your maintenance costs. Because remember, maintenance is 10%. So if you find a camera that you really like and it's $10,000, it's really $11,000. And in fact, it's really $12,000 because you've got to put aside some contingency for that budget item in case that camera isn't available and you need to substitute it, or it requires extra power or something you hadn't counted on. And then you have the maintenance on that camera, which the higher end things, like I said, if you drive a Ford Focus, you have relatively low maintenance costs. You might have to go in more often than other cars if it's a Lemon, but your maintenance costs are not nearly what you would have if you have the same year Mercedes and bring it in for the same service. So use lower end if you can, right? Be frugal. Again, the contingency and the maintenance agreement are built into that budget. And if you don't use my spreadsheet, that's okay. But you must add 10% of your total of components for contingency and another 10% for a maintenance agreement onto your total and still stay under the 55. And that's 55 as of today. That may change before we get to the end, which is one more hint on the budget. So, project deliverables. I'll go over these one more time so everybody's clear. Drawings, a fresh, clean copy with a standard color key that I provided in this lecture. You've printed out the slides, so therefore you have that, so you know what colors to use. Other colors don't exist. Please don't use other colors because I won't know what you're talking about when you make those marks. Okay. The scope, all the sections in the red filled out. You have to include the camera model numbers and the reason for the selection. Also make sure that you review the feedback on your midterm and explain or change anything that was in the feedback. It's your call. If you can explain it, then I'm okay with it. If you're adamant that you want to put glass breaks inside because you're concerned about X, you just need to tell me what X is, and I will go by your decision. You are the security manager in that case, but you need to be able to explain it just as you would need to explain it to someone when you're asking for your budget. And then the budget workbook with the correct totals. You're responsible for the math in the end, so double check my math in every case. I put the formulas in there, but this is my disclaimer. You are responsible for the total amount. If I made a mistake in a formula, you're still responsible for the amount. So I provided the tool with no guarantees. So this week, this is the things I want you to work on. I want you to work on your projects a little bit. Don't try to do it all in this same week. Start to work on your camera selections. I would go ahead and populate the budget worksheet if you're comfortable with it. And then I would start on the drawing, but understand that you may have to make a change if your budget changes. So you could do the drawing again if you wanted to, or you could just make a rough copy of the drawing. Don't worry too much about how neat it is, just to have it and do your final drawing in the final week, right, when we know there's not going to be any changes coming. Scope document, again, is easier to change. It's a Word document. You can hop in there, make some changes, and resave it. But drawings, I would not suggest that you go ahead and redo your drawing this week, except for taking a clean copy. Go ahead and mark it up so you know where your things are. Use the colors that we decided you were going to use. And have it so that you can, from that, just go ahead and make a very clean copy in the end if you don't make any changes. This week, we're going to write a discussion on a security policy. I made a list of those potentials that you could use, or if you have another idea on a policy that you just feel that you want to write, you want to give a try on, something a little different, something you might be doing for your job if you're working in someplace where you need to write a policy now, or your boss has asked you, hey, we need a policy on this. Then by all means, let me know what that's going to be before you do it, please. But I'm really open to fresh ideas on that. That is due on Sunday. That is an addition to the thread that you wrote on your original policy. So go to your original policy and do an answer to it, if you will, with this new security-related policy. I originally was going to have you go into other people's policies and try to see how you would get around them. But frankly, most of them were pretty tight. There were a few, I made some comments on a few, but in most cases, I was really just trying to get people to think as opposed to make solid comments on something they did wrong, because the policies were all very, very good. Even the ones they made comments on, I was really just trying to prod you into, okay, what about this and what about that, just to get you in the right framework for when you write your security policy. But answer your own policy with the security policy. That's due Sunday. I'm doing project reviews this week on drawings. So if you do that rough drawing, I don't care so much about the neatness, but if you want to use the colors and you want me to take a look at drawings to see if there's an issue, you can send them to me by email, and I will take a quick look at them and let you know whether you're on the right track. That's for just anybody who feels like they may be floundering just a little bit. It might be smart to do that. Just drawings, no scopes, no budget this week. And then the COVID-19 discussion that we started on things you might do for your workplace, that's still open, and I'm looking for ideas on reopening strategies. Now that people might be coming back to work, what might you have to do differently as a security manager, and what services might you be able to provide to make sure people are safe when they get back? So next week, projects are going to take that little twist we talked about. That's the week that I set aside for projects. It's the week before they're due. They're going to be a little bit of a twist, and probably budget, maybe availability of certain model of camera, maybe, could be anything, right? If you follow the simple is best philosophy, use the most simple technology that gets the job done, you're going to be okay. If you added a lot of motion, lasers, really high-end cameras, facial recognition and retina scans and those kinds of things, then you're probably going to have some trouble adjusting. You'll be able to do it, I'm sure, but it's going to be more impactful. So stick with that simple philosophy, right? If your budget is close to 55, I'd say within 10% of it when you're done with everything added together. Or if you're over, I'd start to think about adjustments right now, because the biggest impact you're going to get to a project like this at the last minute in any workplace is going to be budget. It's not going to be, we decided to go a different philosophy on security. It's going to be your budget's been cut for some reason. And so if you're really close when you do your budget this week, when you fill out that spreadsheet, just take a look at it, do the gut check. If you're really close, if you're within 10%, if you're over 50,000, I'd start to say, wait, stop. I need to reconsider a few things and maybe make some adjustments downward, because if not, if there's a budget hit, which there probably will be, I'm going to be suffering. So that's kind of where I want you to be with the budget. And finally, just a few notes here. If you have any technology challenges, you're all working from home now, whether that's your own apartment or home with your parents or someone else. The technology has changed. You don't have access to the print center that you would have on campus. You don't have access to go to the library to use their equipment there. So if you have technology challenges, I need to understand those now. Please tell me, I can't do this because I don't have a printer. Well, then we'll figure a workaround. We'll figure a way to get something printed and sent to you. I don't know what the answers are because I don't know what the problems are. I can't find the solutions till I know what I'm trying to solve for. But I need to understand those technology challenges now. So let me know if you have those. Then challenges may pop up. Look, home equipment is not as robust as the stuff that's on campus. I know that I buy a new printer for my home, it seems like every year or two. I just bought another one because they tend to wear out. My wife and daughter are in business together and they do a lot of copying, but they never seem to work as well as the ones that I use at work, right? So when things do pop up, I also need to know about that without delay. So as we go through the next several weeks, if you're having any technology issues, connectivity issues, equipment issues, whatever it might be, I need to know those right as soon as you know them so we can work together on them. I meant to say I sent some email. I sent some email to several of you on work that's outstanding. Some of you haven't turned in some things that you said you would, and you haven't made good on that. I'm going to close those out this week with zeros. So if you have work that I've sent you an email on to say, where is this or where is that, then you need to make good on that work as soon as possible, or contact me to tell me why it may not be able to be done. But I need some contact back if I've sent you email. It's a good practice whenever I send you an email to just send me back a one-word acknowledged or received, even just so that I know you got it. I'm available all week. not going anywhere, just like the rest of us. So if you need to talk to me, the time is good. You all have my cell phone number. You all have my text number, same number. Email. If you need to reach out, please do. If you have questions on the project, please reach out. Let's get those out this week, because next week we're going to make some final adjustments on it. Then it's going to be due. And then we'll go into our final exam, which is a paper. It's a short one. And those of you who had me before know it's not a heavy lift. It's a reflection paper. But we'll work on that together too. If you need me, you know where to find me. Have a great week. Be safe.